Now with BHP in the low emissions technology team, where he's been leading studies assessing decarbonization of material movement and electricity supply, working with colleagues in Australia and Chile.
Thank you, Adrian, and thank you, Peter, for that. It wasn't only the segue. I'd like to think that we were prepared enough to collaborate to make sure our presentations were complementary, but it turns out we didn't need to, because I think that was a perfect warm-up into this presentation. So the intro said BHP, and I am with BHP, but this presentation is in my role as a co-chair of the Zero Emissions Surface Mining work stream that is part of ICMM. And that work stream includes, I'm happy to say, Peter's a key part of that work stream, active contributor, and a lot of the companies in this room, the mining companies, are represented on that work stream as well. So, I'll just give you a little rundown of what we'll be covering today, a little brief intro to what ICMM is, because not everyone's familiar, what the Innovation for Cleaner, Safer Vehicles program is, what greenhouse gas-free surface mining vehicles by 2040 is all about, and where we are on the journey. So ICMM is an international organisation dedicated to a safe, fair and sustainable mining and metals industry, bringing together 26 mining and metal companies and 35 regional and commodities associations. We strengthen environmental and social performance and serve as a catalyst for change, enhancing mining's contribution to society. And apologies if I read a few things this morning, because I'm representing an organisation that has a lot of companies involved. I want to make sure I don't slip up any words. The ICMM is engaged in a broad range of activities, but one of our foremost recent focus areas is the Innovation for Cleaner, Safer Vehicles program, which I'll be focusing on today. So what is the ICSV program? It was announced in October of 2017 and aims to introduce greenhouse gas emissions-free surface mining vehicles by 2040, but there are two other elements as well. One is to minimise the operational impact of diesel exhaust by 2025, and that's focused primarily on underground operations where the impacts are more concentrated, and also make collision avoidance technology available to mining companies by 2025. The program brings together 27 of the world's leading mining companies and some of the best-known truck and mining equipment suppliers to accelerate innovation to develop a new generation of mined vehicles. It's the first ICMM program to actively involve OEMs, who are the original equipment manufacturers, in scoping, managing and delivering the work, and this is essential to the success of the program. The initiative has CEO-level support within all participating mining companies and equipment manufacturers and will benefit the entire mining sector, not just ICMM members. I should note it is open to other equipment manufacturers who would like to join, and also if other mining companies want to join ICMM, it's a great way to get involved in this industry-leading program. Achieving each of these work streams is being managed by three groups of participants, which we call work streams. There are ambition statements for each of the work streams, but I'll focus on the greenhouse gas one, which is reduce greenhouse gas emissions. The program will promote operational and technological innovation to reduce net greenhouse gas emissions from mining equipment, mobile mining equipment, to increase energy efficiency and greenhouse gas reduction technologies, with the ambition of achieving greenhouse gas-free surface mining vehicles by 2040. This 2040 sounds like a long way away, but I'll cover a bit later on why this is ambitious and it's a significant departure from business as usual. So why has this ambition been set and what's driving it? The main drivers are, of course, climate change, health, and there's an urgency around vehicle development and replacement cycles, which I mentioned before. 2040 sounds like a long way away, but it's less than 2 fleet replacement cycles. These vehicles last for a long time. So on climate change, firstly, it's just the right thing to do. The companies involved in ICMM are there because they want to benefit society, not just maximise profits. It's about maximising value, and you can't do that if you're not helping to meet the needs of the transition to mitigate the impacts of climate change. Additionally, we've heard throughout the past couple of days that there's increasing shareholder focus on greenhouse gas emissions and climate change action and preparedness. There's also community pressure, and also these companies recognise that to be an employer of choice, you need to be acting in a way that your employees are expecting you to act. So they come to work each day with that sense of purpose and alignment. On the health front, greenhouse gas-free surface mining vehicles means fossil fuel-free surface mining vehicles. There's sort of no two ways about that. This means that there are naturally going to be health benefits that come along with meeting the greenhouse gas goals. If you aren't combusting diesel, then you won't be producing diesel particulate matter or other products of combustion, such as NOx and SOx and various other things that you don't necessarily want to be breathing in. The urgency that I mentioned before, if we want to be ready for the world that we will find ourselves in 2040, we need to start preparing for it today. Surface mining equipment, in many cases, is highly specialised technology and not only has long development cycles, but can take quite some time to integrate into mining operations. If you're changing the type of vehicle, it may have impacts on the entire system. Because mining operations are a highly integrated system, so you can't simply change the specification or characteristics of one element in the fleet without it having flow-on effects that also need to be managed and planned for. Digging a bit deeper into this burning platform, the urgency, why the change, the mining sector accounts for 38% of global industrial energy use. That equates to 11% of global energy consumption is by the mining sector. In Australia, 32% of energy used by the mining sector is in the form of diesel. I've actually heard some different numbers. When I was doing a bit of research on this, I also saw a number that I heard the other day, which was I think 41 or 42%. I think I've found the more recent data set, but feel free to challenge me. It's in that range of 32 to 41, and that was a fairly recent number as well, so it reflects how dynamic the industry is. The amount of diesel that's used by the mining sector in Australia is 23% of Australia's total diesel consumption, which equates to 10% of total liquid fuels consumed in Australia. So what are our options here? As I mentioned before, greenhouse gas-free surface mining means fossil fuel-free surface mining, which essentially means if you're getting gigajoules to do work, they're coming from renewable energy. How do we get that renewable energy to do the work that we need to move the materials from where they are to where we want them to be? I'll sort of jump to the far side of that screen and just mention that for this study, non-fleet alternatives are out of scope. We're focusing on decarbonising fleet. It doesn't mean that it's not important. As Peter mentioned before, they're looking at in-pit crush and convey. I think lots of companies are looking at the non-fleet alternatives. There's a few reasons why this is focusing just on the fleet alternatives. It's a combination of just having clarity around scope so people know where the boundaries are and take off a manageable chunk of work. But also, there's the potential that zero-emission surface mining fleet may actually be lower cost than business as usual. If it is lower cost than business as usual, then that means that non-fleet alternatives have a bigger challenge to beat fleet. Fleet does have intrinsic benefits around flexibility and the ability to change how you're mining, where you're mining, depending on changes that occur throughout the process. There are lots of benefits to non-fleet solutions, but there are trade-offs as well. So once you've got that renewable electricity, part of this, I'll get to where we are in the journey a bit down the track, but we're not wanting to pick winners early on. We really want to go as wide as possible, look at all of the options, and if we're ruling technology options out, we want to have a rigorous, robust, reviewable methodology there saying why options have been reduced. So while I have my personal opinions, we're not picking winners yet. Fortunately, Peter was up here presenting on behalf of his organisation, and he's free to pick winners, so I think he did a really good presentation. I think delivering gigajoules to the vehicles with as few transformations in that process, so trolley assist, delivering electricity straight to the vehicles, that's undoubtedly the most efficient way to get gigajoules from one place to another, but it doesn't mean that when you include all of the different value streams and the benefits from different alternatives, that will be the final winner. The other thing is that many solutions may be part of the final situation that we find ourselves in. So it might be that you're using trolley assist where that's practical, hydrogen where that's practical. You might be, so we've got biofuels, hydrogen, battery electric, all of these options are in there. Some of them face very different challenges to others. They all have their challenges, but the idea is to work out what is technically feasible and what areas they might apply, and that is what we're planning on doing in the coming year. But the message to suppliers here, the relevance of this work to the suppliers in the room that are here primarily talking about renewables and storage is, if we're not using fossil fuels, what would it mean if all of the energy that I was describing in this graph here was supplied by renewables? Think about the scale of renewable installation that's required to meet that, and for that to be reliable, the amount of storage that's required to back that up. It's a massive figure. I haven't done the sums in this presentation, but that you can do your own and realise that the market opportunity is huge. Now, a little bit about what we are and aren't doing. ICMM isn't developing the technology. We're providing a platform for collaboration, collating industry information to inform OEMs and other participants in the industry, and developing a knowledge hub, so that's all easily accessible, and different people in companies. We've heard about companies being very siloed. The idea is you can just log into the ICMM website, go to the knowledge hub, and you can get that leading information on what this transition will look like. And that the knowledge hub and the collaboration is being replicated across the other work streams as well. So if you're interested in eliminating DPM in underground mining, which initially is probably about managing the products of combustion and then moving into electrification as well, or whether it's about the vehicle interaction, automation, collision avoidance, those knowledge hubs are being developed as well, and the VI one, I think the early stage is already up on the website. We're also about just accelerating this transition through building and communicating consensus, because OEMs dread having different mining companies coming, and one saying we need hydrogen trucks, another one saying we need battery trucks, another one saying we're focusing on trolley assist, another one saying no, we're still keen on the natural gas. If we can provide a considered consensus view from the industry where we've done the homework and we know why it's going in one direction, the OEMs will be far more comfortable investing in the R&D that they need to do. And doing all of that involves the people in ICMM having a lot of meetings, a lot of telecoms, and because of the time zones involved, a lot of coffee. One of the early pieces of communications tool that's coming out is this maturity framework. So it's about communicating to companies exactly what we're talking about achieving, where we're getting to, and what the different steps in that process might be, and also for companies to be able to do a bit of a self-assessment to work out where they are on the journey, whether they're relatively... Generally, you go and ask people where they are on any spectrum, and they'll generally say they're probably about average, unless they think they're doing particularly well. This tool is designed to tease out with a bit of detail to inform people, are you average, are you above average, are you below average, and if you want to get to the point of meeting this ambition statement, what are the steps that you need to do to get there? The knowledge hub I mentioned before, you'll be able to log into the ICMM website and have access to this information. I haven't actually clarified whether it will be open to the industry generally or whether it's just ICMM members, but a lot of the companies in the room today are ICMM members, so they'll have the opportunity, definitely. But we've still got a lot of work to do. So we need to define the strengths and constraints of all of the potential technologies. We need to have a really thorough understanding of fleet energy profiles throughout the industry. Peter mentioned before that if they implement trolley assist, they think they can reduce diesel consumption by about 65%. The numbers that I've seen in various locations indicate that sort of 60 to 75% range is where if you have a pit and you're moving material out of the pit, you really use the bulk of your energy on the ramp, fully loaded, and the flat haul at the top, flat haul at the bottom, and other operations are other minor elements, which lends itself to, as Peter described, trolley assist in those high intensity areas and battery range extension for the bits that you're not on trolley assist. But you could do that range extension with hydrogen, you can do it with biofuels, you could do it in the interim. You can still be using diesel. If the industry reduced its diesel consumption by 75% by installing a technology that's over half a century old, that's not a bad starting point. We also want to identify opportunities to better exploit that existing technology by making it more of an off-the-shelf, easily implementable solution, and people understand what the trade-offs are and what they can do to prepare their minds for it. So it's definitely still early days, but the leadership of the organisations at the very top has communicated a real need for urgency, and there's an enthusiasm and capability in the industry to deliver this. The next 2 years have been mapped out in a bit of detail, so we're still in that defining and aligning range. As I say, it's very early days. We're developing the maturity frameworks, working out where we are and what we need to do. Then in the second half of this year, working more towards the technology development approach. How do we start doing the R&D and developing the technology that's needed? Then moving into promoting and educating the work that's been done. So hopefully if you'll have me back next year, I can report on some of the homework that's been done and some of the lessons that we're getting out of it. And then we're moving into that outreach stage. So it won't just be this conference. We'll be having Peter and the fellow workstream members presenting wherever we get a chance to present, because we really need to get the industry behind this because it's a huge undertaking. And the industry is already very well represented, so this just covers off on the vehicle interaction, diesel particulate matter and greenhouse gas workshops that we had in March in London. The next workshops are in August, once again in London, where all the people come together from the mining companies, OEMs and other participants such as government and industry bodies. And there's a really good mix there, so you can see that it's not just a few mining companies hanging around talking to each other, we're involving the industry. Got a couple of quotes here, and these are the quotes that are rolled out for all of the work streams. So the first one, I think, is that the future is already here, it's just not evenly distributed. It's relevant to all of them, but it's more relevant to vehicle interaction and eliminating DPM, because there are companies that have very good autonomy systems that are minimising vehicle interaction, and there are Tier 4 final engines that emit very low DPM and low NOx and SOx that have been adopted at some underground mines. And we heard the other day that there are underground mines that are already operating at upwards of 80% of their production is through electric vehicles. So the technology's there. Part of what ICMM is doing is just about making sure that everyone has the access to the information to plan that in their future developments, and also build the business case in the most holistic way to really understand the value that decarbonising and reducing DPM and reducing vehicle interactions brings to the business to help justify some of these investments that are required. And the second one, with the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, I mentioned the other day in the hydrogen one, with one of our big OEMs, 10% of their revenue globally is in the mining sector, and the biggest single customer is 10% of that. So if one company goes up and says, we buy less than 1% of your vehicles, you're not necessarily going to get the same response as if you have the industry coming up and saying, we buy a good chunk of these vehicles and we need these changes to happen. And we've got together, we've got a united voice, and we want to move in this direction. So the call to action is get involved, whether you're an OEM or a mining company or in a government or other capacity. It'd be great to have you involved in this program, because we need as many industry participants as possible to help make that voice as loud as possible. If you're a mining company and you're not a member yet, become a member of ICMM. This is just one example of the great work that ICMM does. We've heard a lot about tailings recently, and they're really leading the industry response to the existential moment for the mining industry that is happening around tailings. But there's heaps of great work that they do around community, sustainability, all sorts of areas. Jump on the website and have a look. And if anyone here has any questions about any of it, just come and have a chat to myself or Peter afterwards, and we'll very happily share what we can. So thank you very much, and hopefully we have some time for questions.
Same question, but I think this project with ICMM, it would be fantastic in order to make activities of training, capacitation and certification of professionals. Because I think in future, in 10 years, there must be a certification of low carbon. I don't know the name, if must be climate smart mining or some certificate. And this is one side. And the other side is not only how miners must understand these new challenges on renewables, but also the suppliers coming, that they need to understand what mining means. I tell you, based on the experience we have in the energy and mines sector. Okay, so the question is capacitation and all this stuff. Thank you.
Well, on the ICMM front, it's clearly been identified in the initial development, and I should say it was the ambition statements were announced in October of 2017, but that was on the back of 12, 18 months of work that was done by my boss Kirsten Rose and a few other people in ICMM. So there was a huge amount of work done in defining what we need to achieve, and they identified training, capacity building, knowledge sharing, all of that as being a critical element to this. So that's why we're having a knowledge hub and why we're trying to have community outreach and inform as much as possible. On the certification front, that's not my area of expertise, so I won't really make any comment on that.
Yeah, great presentation, guys. Jamie Alley. My question is around, I think the way, if I understood correctly, in the ICMM, in this group, it's not just the mining companies, but OEMs and vendors can be part of the group as well. Is that right?
Correct.
So the question is, how are you managing the risk that people that are in the group might steer everybody towards certain solutions? Or maybe another way to ask it is how are you engaging with the industry to gather the information that you're using to put together the white papers? Is it is there a request for information kind of process, or how do you get the information on what is available and what things cost and where people are doing R&D?
I'd say probably the answer to that isn't fully defined yet. One of the first things that we're doing in our work stream is putting a scope of work together to work out whether, because all of the people from the companies, it's things that are sort of peripheral to their core business and their KPIs, so they can't devote full time to answering all of those questions. So ICMM is funded to do some of that internally. They can also engage consultants or other third parties to try and go out to industry and collate all of that information. If that first step is always sort of lit review, see whether that kind of work has already been done and the information sits somewhere. I acknowledge it's a big process. On the question of whether having certain people in the room could steer it in a certain direction, there's enough diversity in the room for people to recognise if that's happening, but my experience so far is that it's the best example of industry-wide collaboration that I've seen. We've got people in there that really take off their corporate hat and put on the ICMM industry hat and say, we need to achieve this outcome, how do we do it? And you're hearing people from companies that at first glance you'd assume that they'd be pushing in one direction, and they surprise you by saying, no, we recognise it has to go here and we need to reinvent what we're doing to achieve that and help facilitate that, but at the same time the customers need to have a cohesive voice in saying this is the direction we're going. So it's something to be aware of and cautious of, but to date I've just seen amazing collaboration and effort coming from all of the people that aren't just pushing at barrows. So be interested to hear whether it is.
No, I think that's a good summary of it. My experience from the workshops that we had in March was that we had broad representation from those 27 mining companies that are members. There was great representation from OEMs as well, and really the people that were there in person are the representatives of their company bringing forward not just their personal view but their corporate position as well. The challenge with the OEMs is always going to be around IP and how do we move forward with technologies where there might be a little bit of covering up of keeping cards close to their chest in terms of what they're doing. So that's an issue that I think we really need to work through going forward. But as we're at that early stage and we're elaborating out not just what the roadmap is to the future, but what it is that people can do in the short term as well. You know, trolley's an example of that. You know, then I think just the contributions of all parties has been outstanding today.
Michael Scott in Rio Tinto. I think the first thing I might say is if this was shaped like a football, you'd have a lot more people asking questions. Just a clarification on the ICMM and the OEM people that are participating. What level of participation are you getting from the energy supply side of the business? Obviously, with the surface mining, it's that integrated fuel engine vehicle. Can you give some examples of the OEMs who are participating?
Yeah, at the moment it's definitely focused around the mobile mining equipment OEMs and the not necessarily the brand on the truck, but the components in the truck as well. So drivetrains, power supply, that kind of thing. It isn't going back to the energy supply to the mine. So whether it's electrons or hydrogen or biofuels coming across the fence, we're not looking at that level of question yet, because we're still trying to work out what it means for fleet. When we know what it means for the fleet and what kind of energy they might be requiring, then we can ask, is it worth going to that level? It might be that that it's one of those things that the answer is different depending on the region and whether you're grid connected or off grid, and what your mining solution is. So it could be that it's just such a broad issue that we need to leave it to individuals to sort that out, but I guess we'll find out.